The Grand Galactic Trade Center was full of noise. Hundreds of alien merchants stood behind their colorful stalls. Bright lights blinked. Strange smells floated in the air. Creatures of every shape and size crowded the long halls. Some floated. Some slithered. Some stomped heavily with metal boots. At the center of it all, a group of aliens laughed loudly. Their voices were deep and sharp, bouncing off the silver walls. They pointed at a small booth at the corner. At that booth, a human was setting up his table. His name was James Holloway. James was the only human there. His clothes were simple, just a dusty brown jacket and black cargo pants. His booth was even simpler, an old folding table, a single chair, and a small black case. He placed the case carefully on the table and opened it with a soft click. Inside, a few glowing crystals sat neatly on black cloth. The aliens roared with laughter again. "Look at the human," one alien snorted. It had 4 eyes and scales that shimmered blue under the lights. "He thinks he can trade here with rocks." Another alien, tall and thin like a tree, laughed so hard it almost fell over. "Maybe he will sell pebbles next. Poor humans. They do not understand real business." James heard everything. He kept his face calm. He did not reply. He simply arranged the crystals neatly, one by one, each glowing faintly like trapped stars. Nearby, a group of rich alien traders whispered among themselves. They wore long flowing robes made of silk-like materials that shifted colors when they moved. They were the power merchants of the galaxy, controlling fortunes with a single signature. "Easy target," one of them said. His voice was oily. "Yes, humans are new to the galaxy. They don't even know how to negotiate. We will buy his junk, cheap. Then we will laugh even more." The laughter grew louder. James wiped a spot on the table and sat down. His dark brown eyes were steady, watching the crowd like a fisherman waiting for the right moment to pull his net. He was not angry. He was patient. Slowly, a curious alien approached. It was small, no taller than James's waist, with shiny green skin and golden rings around its arms. "What are these, human?" it asked, poking a glowing crystal with a sharp finger. James smiled politely. "Celestite crystals," he said simply. "Very rare. Very useful." The small alien laughed and waved its friends over. "Hear that? Very useful. He says, let's buy some and see if we can at least make them into jewelry." Soon several aliens gathered around James's booth. They offered him small amounts of currency, tiny silver cubes, energy chips, and holographic vouchers. James nodded and accepted every offer without complaint. In just 1 hour, he sold almost all the crystals. His case, once full, now looked empty except for a few pieces left. The rich traders stood nearby, smiling cruelly. They whispered to each other, thinking James was foolish. He gave away rare items for nothing. He does not even know their worth. Humans are truly the weakest species here. James leaned back in his chair. His jacket shifted slightly, revealing a hidden wristwatch blinking with soft light. It showed a countdown. 1 hour remaining. James's smile widened just a little. No one noticed. At the far end of the trade center, strange things started happening. Devices began to flicker. Communication pads showed static. Power gloves lost their energy. Engines of small hover carts sputtered and died. Confusion spread slowly at first. Then it grew. Merchants shouted. Buyers cursed. "What's wrong with my scanner?" "My data chip won't load. My transport just crashed." Aliens began to panic. Trade deals froze. Entire contracts were erased before being signed. The massive digital screens showing live trading rates blinked out one by one. In the middle of the growing chaos, James sat quietly, calm as a stone in a river. The few remaining crystals on his table pulsed with a deeper glow, almost like they were breathing. Some aliens finally started connecting the dots. They stared at the crystals, at James, and then at their broken devices. Fear replaced their laughter. James tapped his case closed. He stood up slowly. His simple boots made soft sounds against the marble floor. As he walked away from the now ruined Trade Center, one thought echoed in every alien's mind. What have we done? The Trade Center was no longer laughing. A cold silence had fallen over the massive hall. Stalls flickered with half-dead lights. Hover carts sat abandoned, their engines whining helplessly. Rich merchants stared at their useless data pads, pressing buttons harder and harder as if sheer force could fix the problem. In the middle of this confusion, James Holloway stood quietly, adjusting the strap of his old leather bag. He walked slowly, as if he had all the time in the universe. Behind him, alien traders argued and cursed. Some even shouted at each other, blaming random bystanders for their broken devices. But deep inside, many had the same thought, a terrifying thought they were afraid to say aloud. The crystals. One of the wealthiest merchants, Vron Tarek, a six-armed alien draped in gold chains, spotted James moving toward the exit. His golden eyes narrowed. He rushed after him, his boots slamming hard against the floor. "Human!" Vron barked, his voice trembling between anger and fear. "Wait." James stopped. He turned, his face calm. "Yes?" Vron reached him, panting slightly. His guards surrounded them, holding pulse staves nervously. "You sold us something dangerous," Vron said, glancing around to make sure others were watching. "You must fix it." James raised an eyebrow. "I sold you celestite crystals. You bought them willingly." Vron's hands twitched. "I will pay you more. Just fix it. Stabilize our systems." James thought for a moment. His hand slid into his bag. Slowly, he pulled out a small, polished device, a simple metal cube with a blinking green light. "This," James said softly, "is a stabilizer. It neutralizes the crystal's energy fields. Very effective, very rare." Vron's golden eyes widened. "How much?" he hissed. James smiled gently. "For you, 100,000 credits." Gasps echoed from the nearby traders who had gathered around. 100,000 credits could buy a cargo ship, a small asteroid mine, or even a year's worth of supplies for an entire colony. Vron's face turned a dark shade of purple. His mouth opened to protest, but then his personal tablet, hanging from his belt, sparked and died with a sad buzz. He had no choice. None of them did. "Fine," Vron growled. He slammed a golden cube, a credit voucher, into James's hand. James calmly handed him the stabilizer and watched as Vron hurried back to his booth, attaching the device to his main console. Within seconds, the systems around Vron flickered, stabilized, and returned to full power. His merchants and guards cheered. The crowd surged forward. Aliens who had mocked James just hours ago now pushed and shouted, waving their credit tokens, begging for the stabilizers. James stood firm. 100,000 credits each, he said, his voice clear over the growing noise. No discounts, no negotiations. A stampede began. Aliens threw riches at James. Precious stones, star maps, energy vaults, and even personal favors in exchange for the stabilizers. From a balcony high above, the trade overseers watched in shock. Never in their history had a single human controlled the trade floor like this. Never had the mighty alien races begged like desperate children. Down below, James worked quickly, handing out stabilizers, collecting payment after payment. His small black bag never seemed to empty. Every stabilizer he pulled out looked fresh, clean, and ready to sell. Someone finally whispered what many were starting to realize. He planned this. The human set a trap, and we all walked into it. But it was too late now. Hours later, as the twin suns of the trade center began to set, James stood beside a towering pile of riches. His simple booth was now surrounded by chests of rare materials, alien currency, and priceless relics. The merchants, who still hadn't bought stabilizers, stared in horror at their dead systems, knowing that every passing minute cost them more money. James picked up his bag and slung it over his shoulder once again. Calm, silent, untouchable. He turned to the crowd and said the words they would remember forever. "Next time you laugh at humans, remember today." Then he walked away, leaving behind a hall full of broken pride and empty wallets. The trade center, once proud and buzzing, now felt like a battlefield after defeat. Stalls were abandoned. Rich merchants sat on the floor, their heads in their hands. The soft hum of broken machines filled the air like a ghost's whisper. James. Holloway walked through it all untouched. His boots clicked against the cracked marble floor as he passed by desperate faces and dead tech. His leather bag swung lightly at his side, filled with treasures he had just collected. But something deeper was happening, something even the aliens had not yet realized. Far above, hidden behind a transparent dome, a group of trade overseers watched James carefully. Their faces showed a mix of anger and fear. These were powerful beings, judges of trade, masters of galactic law. No one tricked them, no one, until now. "How did one human do this?" whispered Overseer Dren, his voice sharp like broken glass. Another overseer, a heavy creature made of living stone, growled low. "He sold harmless stones, no rules broken." "But look at the systems," a third overseer said, pointing at the screens showing dark marketplaces, dead ships, frozen accounts. "Look at the damage." On the ground floor, the merchants were panicking. Even those who bought stabilizers now realized a terrible truth. The crystals were not simple disruptors. They were active parasites. The celestite crystals James sold were alive. They fed on energy, slowly, quietly. At first, the stabilizers calmed them, but not forever. In a few days, even stabilized systems would rot and die. James had not sold them junk. He had sold them hunger wrapped in beauty. One young alien, a technician from the Draxon Guild, finally understood. He scanned one of the crystals in panic. His scanner showed flashing warnings. Organic entity detected. Energy absorption level, extreme. System integrity, failing. The technician ran to the center of the hall, waving his pad in the air. "They're alive," he screamed. "The crystals are alive." The entire hall froze. The merchants who had laughed at James hours ago now looked at each other in horror. How much of their fleets, their companies, their banks, how much was already infected? And James? James simply reached the heavy doors of the trade center, which creaked open with a hiss. Outside, the twin suns burned low on the horizon, painting the sky in golden fire. A few desperate aliens ran after him. "Wait," they cried, "we'll pay you double, triple. Please tell us how to stop it." James turned slowly. His eyes, once warm and human, now looked like sharpened blades. Calm, dangerous. "You laughed at humans," he said, his voice low but clear. "You thought we were weak. You thought we were stupid." He paused, letting the silence squeeze the air. "You forgot the most important rule in the galaxy," he said, stepping closer. "Never underestimate a human who's been studying you longer than you've been studying him." The aliens fell silent. James gave them a small, almost sad smile. "I didn't come here to sell crystals," he said. "I came to teach a lesson." Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the burning sunset, leaving behind a galaxy trembling at the name human. Far above, in the Overseer's tower, panic broke out. "We must stop him," Dren shouted. "Too late," rumbled the stone. "Overseer. By the time we act, the infection will have spread to every system. And when it does," another Overseer whispered with terror, "humanity will not be asking for permission. They will be taking whatever they want." In the deep shadows of the trade center ruins, small lights flickered. Lights from ships, trade routes, and cities, all connected by the systems now silently being eaten from within. The galaxy had opened, its gates to a new kind of invader, not with guns, not with warships, but with quiet patience, with clever traps, with the brilliant, dangerous mind of a single human. The age of alien supremacy was ending. The age of humanity had just begun. Inside the Grand Galactic Trade Center, the once mighty merchants of the galaxy were now broken figures. Their faces, once proud and full of mocking smiles, were pale with fear. Their riches, once symbols of power, now lay scattered and worthless at their feet. All around them, machines continued to fail. Lights dimmed to darkness. Communication links stayed dead. Hover carts rusted into useless junk. And the crystals, those beautiful glowing crystals, continued to hum silently, eating everything. Above the shattered hall, the trade overseers argued loudly inside their glass tower. Some demanded to capture the human. Others spoke of war. But none of them had an answer to the most painful question of all. How could we have been so blind? Back on the floor, chaos turned into desperation. Vron Tarek, the mighty six-armed merchant lord, was now on his knees. His golden robes were torn. His hands shook as he clutched a broken data chip, whispering to himself. His personal fortune, worth more than a small planet, was gone. Around him, other merchants begged James Holloway's assistance, small robots programmed to deliver more stabilizers. But there were none left. James had taken the last of them when he walked out. A new rumor spread like wildfire. The human holds the real cure. If we don't pay him soon, our worlds will fall. Panic exploded. Within hours, desperate offers flooded the trade center. Ownership papers for luxury space stations, shares in mining corporations, titles to rare world colonies. Entire war fleets, all offered for one thing, a meeting with James Holloway. In a private, shadowy room nearby, James sat alone. His table was simple. His chair was plain. But the line outside his door stretched for miles. One by one, the proud alien merchants entered, and one by one, they knelt. Each merchant laid treasures at James's feet, begging for help, promising loyalty, swearing oaths, offering everything. James listened silently. His eyes were steady, cold, calculating. To some, he handed a small black card, the first step in buying back a piece of their broken lives. To others, he simply shook his head, and those aliens left broken, knowing their empires would collapse within days. There was no anger in James's actions, no cruelty, only business. This was the price of arrogance. This was the cost of laughing at humanity. In a quiet corner, two young alien merchants whispered. They had once mocked James loudly. Now they clutched each other, terrified. Maybe, one whispered, humans are not weak at all. Maybe, said the other, voice trembling. They were just waiting for the right time to strike. At the end of the long line, an ancient being approached. Master Vakar, head of the Celestial Exchange, a merchant older than many stars. His skin shimmered like silver mist. He had never bowed to anyone in centuries, but now Vakar knelt before James. Human, Vakar rasped. Take my vaults, my ships, my holdings, just save us. James looked at the ancient being for a long, heavy moment. Then he leaned forward, his voice low. I didn't come here for vaults or ships, he said. Vakar's silver eyes widened. Then, what do you want? James smiled faintly. I want memory, he said. I want every being in this galaxy to remember today. The day a human came with nothing and left with everything. Silence swallowed the room. Outside, the news spread faster than light across the galaxy. Systems far away trembled. Trading houses collapsed. Rival factions turned on each other. Worlds that once ruled from their golden towers now scrambled to survive. All because they had mocked a single human. All because they thought laughter was stronger than intelligence. In the growing darkness, humanity's name began to rise, no longer whispered as a joke, now spoken with fear, with awe, with respect. James stood from his chair. He picked up a single golden cube, a symbolic gesture. Then, without another word, he walked past the kneeling crowd, past the wreckage of arrogance, past the desperate hands reaching out. He stepped into the night, where a newly purchased flagship waited for him, a ship bought not with money, but with the shattered pride of an entire galaxy. As he boarded, his words echoed through the hall. One last time. Next time you see a human, remember to bow first, and then he was gone. Gone, but never forgotten. Far away from the broken trade center, beyond the burning twin suns, James Holloway stood silently on the deck of his newly claimed starship. The Sovereign Dawn was a masterpiece, a massive cruiser once owned by the wealthiest merchant lords. Now it belonged to a human who had never even raised his voice in anger. James looked out at the endless stars, his hands folded behind his back. Beside him stood a small robotic assistant, scanning live reports from across the galaxy. Systems were failing. Corporations were collapsing. Fleets were grounding. Worlds were falling into panic, and all of it had started with a simple black case filled with glowing stones. Below deck, dozens of aliens, former owners, former masters, now sat quietly in holding cells. They were not prisoners by force. They were prisoners by choice, having signed away their freedom in desperate bargains with James. On the ship's bridge, a young human officer named Mara approached him carefully. Her boots clicked against the polished floor as she saluted. "Sir," she said, voice shaking slightly, "the Trade Council has issued an emergency broadcast. They are asking for negotiations." James turned slowly, his face calm as ever. "Negotiations?" he repeated softly. "After all their laughter?" Mara hesitated. "They say they are willing to offer anything. Money, territories, even ambassador seats for humans in the Galactic Council." James smiled faintly. It was not a cruel smile. It was a patient, knowing smile. The smile of a man who had planned every move long before the first laugh had even been heard. He walked slowly toward the central table where a holographic map of the galaxy floated. Red marks blinked across the map, planets infected by the celestite crystals. Trade routes choked, spaceports dark. It was not just a few worlds anymore. It was spreading everywhere. James touched the map lightly with one finger. "This was never about money," he said. Mara frowned. "Then, what was it about, sir?" James's eyes darkened slightly, remembering. "For decades," he said, "humans were treated like jokes. Weaklings, outsiders. They gave us scraps while they feasted. They sold us dead technologies. They laughed when our colonies struggled. They watched when our ambassadors begged for fair trade, and they turned their backs." His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. "So we learned," James continued. "We studied them. We memorized their habits, their fears, their blind spots. We let them believe we were harmless until the right moment came." Mara stared at him in awe. "You planned all of this years ago?" James nodded once. "Patience wins wars," he said. "Not weapons, not armies. Patience, knowledge, timing." On the map, a flashing new signal appeared. "Emergency summon. Galactic High Council meeting, the aliens. We're calling every leader, every fleet commander, every merchant lord to a single meeting. A last attempt to save themselves." James studied the signal for a long moment. Then he tapped a single button. Message recorded. "This is James Holloway. Of Earth, you laughed at us. You cheated us. You tried to bury us. Now you will rebuild under us." He sent the message across every channel, every planet, every ship, every city. The stars seemed to hold their breath. Across the galaxy, alien leaders received the message. They sat in silence, staring at the calm face of the human who had destroyed their centuries of power with a single plan. Many wept. Some raged. Some knelt. But none dared laugh anymore. On the deck of the Sovereign Dawn, Mara spoke again, her voice trembling with excitement. "Sir, the humans back on Earth are receiving your message. They're celebrating. You're being called a hero. A legend." James turned back to the window, looking out at the endless universe. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. "I'm a reminder." Mara frowned. "A reminder of what?" James's eyes narrowed. "That humanity is never truly defeated," he said. "We are patient, we are stubborn, and when the time is right, we rise." Outside, the first of the human banners unfurled from the flagship's towers, bright blue with a silver Earth symbol shining proudly. It was not just a victory. It was the beginning of a new era, the era of humans, the era of James Holloway, the unseen mastermind who changed the fate of the galaxy without firing a single shot. And somewhere, deep in the hearts of those who once mocked Earth, a new fear was born. Not fear of human weapons, not fear of human armies, but fear of the human. Mine, the most dangerous weapon of all, the sovereign dawn sailed across the stars like a silent king returning to his throne. Its metal hull glowed under the twin suns of nearby systems. On every world it passed, people paused and looked up. They whispered one name with awe, with fear, with respect: James Holloway. Inside the Grand Command Hall of the ship, James stood before a massive screen, watching the galaxy rearrange itself like falling dominoes. One by one, the alien worlds that once ruled trade, commerce, and politics were surrendering. Great banking houses collapsed. Merchant guilds swore loyalty to Earth. Old aristocracies offered their riches to save their dying systems. And James did not have to fire a single shot. On Earth, news channels celebrated day and night. Humans gathered in the streets waving banners, singing songs. Children wore shirts with James's face printed on them, calling him the savior of humanity. But James was not celebrating. Victory was not a moment for noise. It was a moment for decisions. He sat quietly at a large, simple table surrounded by his closest human advisors. Charts and holograms floated above them, showing which worlds had fallen, which ones resisted, and which begged for negotiations. One of his advisors, a sharp-eyed woman named Lena Cross, spoke carefully. "Sir, the alien powers have sent official documents. Full surrender. They are offering key planets, trade routes, and leadership seats. All they ask is survival." James leaned back in his chair. His hands were steepled, his eyes cold and thoughtful. He remembered the mocking laughter. He remembered being dismissed. He remembered humanity being treated like beggars at the table of giants. And now those giants knelt. The universe had shifted, and it would never return to the old ways again. James finally spoke, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Accept their surrender," he said, "but not as equals." The room fell silent. James stood and walked to the wide window overlooking the stars. "They had their chance to treat us with respect," he said softly. "They chose arrogance. Now, they will learn humility." He pointed at the stars. "Every system infected by the crystals will sign a treaty of service," he continued. "For the next 50 Earth years, their wealth, their fleets, their innovations will flow to humanity first." His advisors nodded grimly. James turned back to them. His face softened slightly. "We will not be cruel," he said. "We will not be tyrants. We will teach them what real leadership looks like. Fairness, justice, honor. But," he added, his voice sharpening again, "we will never allow them to forget." A few hours later, a broadcast echoed across the stars. Every planet tuned in. Every race watched. The screen lit up with the image of James Holloway, standing tall in his simple brown jacket, the Earth banner waving proudly behind him. His speech was short, clear, powerful. "Today, humanity rises. We do not come as conquerors. We come as reminders. Respect is earned not by strength alone, but by resilience, by patience, by wisdom. You laughed at us. You betrayed us. You tried to break us. Now you will rebuild beside us or behind us. The choice is yours." The screen went dark. Across the galaxy, leaders of hundreds of worlds bowed their heads and signed the treaties. Ships changed their flags. Banks changed their loyalties. Markets opened with human symbols hanging above their entrances. For the first time in galactic history, Earth stood not as a small voice among giants, but as the center of power, culture, and trade. And James Holloway, he refused titles like Emperor, King, or Supreme Leader. He chose a single title instead: the Architect. the architect of a new galaxy, a galaxy where humanity would never be underestimated again. As he stood alone on the deck that night, looking into the endless darkness, James allowed himself a small, quiet smile. It was not just his victory, it was every human's victory. Every ancestor who dreamed of the stars, every explorer who risked everything for a chance at greatness, every citizen who believed that humanity was meant for more. The stars belonged to Earth now, and Earth belonged to those who never stopped believing. In the silence of space, the sovereign dawn sailed forward, carrying not just one man's triumph, but the hopes of an entire species. The universe would remember this day forever, the day humanity rose from laughter to legend. Many years had passed since that legendary day when humanity rose above the stars. The galaxy had changed forever. Old alien empires that once ruled through fear now stood rebuilt under human guidance. Cities shone brighter, trade was fairer, justice reached corners where darkness once ruled. And still, whispered across every world, every spaceport, every dusty market was the name James Holloway, the architect, the human who changed everything without ever lifting a weapon. But James himself had disappeared from public life. Some said he had retired to a hidden world. Some believed he lived among the stars, sailing endlessly on his mighty ship. Some even said he had never existed at all, just a myth to scare arrogant kings and foolish lords. Only a few knew the truth. Far beyond the busy centers of power, on a quiet green planet called New Avalon, a simple cabin stood by a calm lake. Birds sang in the trees. The air was fresh. The sky was clear. And there, sitting on a wooden chair by the water, was James Holloway. Older now, wiser, but still with the same calm, sharp eyes that once shook the galaxy. A small boy approached him, a local farmer's son no older than 8. His clothes were dusty, his shoes were too big, but his eyes were full of curiosity. "Sir," the boy asked shyly, "is it true? Were you really the one who made the galaxy bow?" James smiled gently. "Who told you that?" he asked. "My father," the boy said proudly. "He says humans used to be laughed at, that they thought we were weak, but you made them respect us. You made them afraid to laugh." James looked out at the lake, its surface shining like glass under the sun. He was silent for a long moment. Finally he spoke, his voice soft but full of memory. "They did laugh," he said. "They called us simple, foolish, unworthy." The boy sat on the grass, listening with wide eyes. "And maybe," James continued, "for a time, they were right. We were small. We made mistakes. We fell behind." He turned to look at the boy. "But being laughed at is not the end of a story," he said. "It's only the beginning, if you're willing to learn." The boy nodded slowly, understanding a little. James leaned closer. "Do you know what the real victory was?" he asked. The boy shook his head. "It wasn't the riches," James said. "It wasn't the ships or the treaties. It wasn't even the fear we inspired." He pointed gently at the boy's chest. "It was here," he said. "In the hearts of every human who refused to give up, who refused to believe the laughter meant we were lesser. We stood. We endured. And when the time came, we rose." The boy smiled brightly, his heart swelling with pride. James laughed softly, the sound light and free. Far away across the galaxy, the anniversary of the day of the rise was being celebrated. Holograms of James Holloway were projected into city squares. Monuments stood in his honor on distant moons. Human flags fluttered above alien palaces. And across every world, a small plaque had been placed at every major trade center. It read, "Respect all. Underestimate none. Remember Holloway." Back by the lake, James stood slowly, his bones a little slower now, but his spirit still sharp. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Remember," he said, "the strongest force in the universe is not power. It's patience, it's belief, it's refusing to stay down when others laugh. The boy grinned and ran off, dreaming of stars, of journeys, of greatness. James watched him go, a small, proud smile on his face. And then he turned back to the lake, the golden sun warm on his skin, and sat quietly, content, at peace, knowing that humanity's place among the stars was secure. They had laughed at humans once, but now the galaxy laughed with them, danced with them, grew with them, and they would never be underestimated again. In the gentle breeze as the waves kissed the shore, it almost seemed like the stars themselves whispered one final truth. The last laugh always belongs to those who endure.